Blood-curdling screams pierced the smoke-thick air as tears streamed down the broken father's face. John Campbell gazed down through blurred eyes at his son's limp body. His only child, Michael, had been slain by the cruel Wogniers, and humankind now faced two choices: cower before the aliens' might or unleash humanity's most terrifying weapons from Cryo sleep and rain fiery vengeance upon the Galactic Empire. John and Michael had been sent as human diplomats to the Wognier homeworld Zephyria, tasked with negotiating a vital trade agreement between Terra and the fearsome reptilians. But the Wogniers were no ordinary species. Standing over 7 feet tall with glistening scales and razor claws, the lizard men were infamous across the galaxy for their vicious conquests and iron-fisted rule. As an Imperial official named Orion led the humans through Zephyria's capital, John shuddered at the stark divide between the lavish palaces of the Wognier elite and the squalid slums of their downtrodden lower castes. Wide-eyed with childlike wonder, young Michael peppered the towering alien with excited questions about Wognier history and culture. To John's unease, Orion boasted of the Empire's brutal subjugations, speaking with pride of planets decimated and species enslaved beneath the Wognier banner. "Careful, son," John warned in a hushed whisper as they settled into their quarters. "Don't let your guard down around the Wogniers, not even for a second. There's no telling what these monsters are capable of." But John could never have imagined the horrific act of savagery that would soon shatter the fragile human Wognier peace and set two mighty civilizations on an inexorable path to total war. The murder of an innocent child was a tragedy that would echo across the stars and awaken the Terran Confederation's most devastating weapons from their frozen slumber to unleash hell upon the Wogniers. The next morning, as the first light touched the gilded spires of Zephyria, John left Michael in their quarters with a Wognier servant called Zaktar. Michael kicked his legs back and forth on the plush chair, staring out the window at the bustling alien city below. "I want to see more cool alien stuff. Can we explore, Zaktar, please?" The servant's forked tongue flicked. "Perhaps a brief tour of the military academy, young master, to pass the time until your father returns." Meanwhile, John sat opposite the Wognier High Council, the weight of billions of human lives pressing down on him. These negotiations had to succeed. Failure meant famine. Orion spoke, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "The Wognier Empire demands full control of the Epsilon colonies. Your settlements there are illegal, and we require samples of your latest propulsion technology immediately." John's hands curled into fists beneath the table. "Absolutely not. Those colonies are full Terra Confederation members. We won't abandon our people to your rule, and our technology is not for sale or barter." The Wognier hissed, tails lashing. "You dare defy us, human? Accept our terms or these talks are over." At the academy, Michael watched in horror as Wognier children, no older than himself, slashed and bit at each other in savage training duels. This wasn't right. A pack of older cadets shoved a smaller child to the ground, kicking and clawing. Without thinking, Michael ran forward, putting himself between them. "Stop it! Leave him alone!" The cadets turned their fury on Michael, pummeling him with punches and gashes. Pain exploded through him as the world went black. Zaktar rushed Michael's limp, bleeding body to a medical facility, but the doctors took one look and stepped back. "We have strict rules, no treating primitives. The human shouldn't have interfered." John burst into the medical bay, Orion on his heels. He froze, seeing Michael lying motionless, covered in blood. A ragged scream ripped from John's throat as he ran to his son. But it was too late. Michael was gone. Orion shifted. Tragic, but the boy brought it on himself, meddling in Wognier affairs. An unfortunate incident. Rage and anguish warred in John's heart as he cradled his son. He raised his head, fixing Orion with a stare that promised retribution. "Incident? You murdered my boy, you monsters. There will be justice for this. The Wognier will pay for what you've done. I swear it." John's face was stone as the diplomatic ship touched down on Earth, his son's casket draped in the Terran Confederation flag beside him. Camera drones swarmed the landing pad, broadcasting the scene across the solar system. Billions watched, united in shock and outrage. as the truth of Michael's murder spread like wildfire. Riots erupted in the streets of New York, Beijing, London. In every city from the Atlantic to the Pacific, protesters chanted outside Confederation embassies, demanding justice, screaming for Wagner blood. The pressure mounted on the Terran government with each passing hour. In an emergency session of the Terran Congress, the decision was unanimous. The Wagner would pay for their crimes. The orders went out, all military personnel to report for immediate deployment. Warships powered up their engines across the Confederation. Troops mustered in their billions. But for the Terran leadership, this wasn't enough. They needed more than numbers. They needed the devils of yesteryear, the Confederation's darkest secret. John stood at rigid attention in Admiral Novak's office, the same room where he'd received his first commission all those years ago. The Admiral's face was grim, his eyes hard as flint. "Campbell, what the Wagner did is unforgivable, and we're going to make them pay, but to do that we need to fight monsters with monsters." Novak called up a holo display, the ghostly blue image resolving into a soldier unlike any John had seen. Muscles bulging with unnatural power, eyes glowing electric blue, the figure looked more machine than man. "Omega soldiers, our greatest weapon and our greatest secret. Genetically engineered killing machines from the Arcturus War, kept on ice for 100 years. Volunteer to lead them, Campbell, and you'll get your revenge. You'll grind the Wagner Empire to dust." John's heart raced, adrenaline surging through his veins. A chance to avenge his son, to burn the Wagner's sins into their scaly hides. He didn't hesitate. "I'll do it, Admiral. Point me at the bastards." Deep in a classified Confederation black site, John stood before a row of cryopods, each one a gleaming metal coffin. Scientists worked frantically at control panels, the hum of power building, readouts flashing green. Then, with a hiss of releasing pressure, the pods cracked open. One by one, the Omega soldiers stepped forth, frost sloughing from their massive frames. Their eyes snapped open, blazing with blue fire, as they turned to face John, awaiting his command. John met their inhuman gaze, his heart an inferno of grief and rage. He would forge these devils into a sword of retribution, an instrument of Terran vengeance. The Wagner had sown the wind. Now they would reap the whirlwind. The Omega soldiers emerged from their cryopods, frost sloughing off their massive frames, eyes blazing electric blue. They stumbled, disoriented, struggling to stand on atrophied muscles. What year is it?" Captain Alexei Volkov growled, his voice gravelly from disuse. The Russian stood an imposing 6'5", his face a roadmap of scars, a gleaming bionic arm whirring as he flexed it. 2323, John replied grimly. "You've been under for 98 years. Volkov reeled, the reality sinking in, a century lost to the ice. He shook his head, forcing the thought aside. Duty called. John briefed the Omegas on the Wagner, voice shaking with barely suppressed rage as he recounted Michael's murder. The soldiers listened, faces hardening, fists clenching. Enhanced minds processed the intel with lightning speed. "They killed your boy," Volkov spat. "We'll make them pay, Commander, blood for blood." The Omegas nodded, united in cold fury. John felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. The devils had a purpose now. Vengeance. The soldiers drilled relentlessly, sparring, running combat sims, relearning their lethal skills. Punches cracked concrete, kicks shattered steel, inhuman speed and strength on raw display. An urgent holo message blinked on, a harried comm officer filling the screen. "Commander Campbell, the fleet's engaged the Wagner at Zephyrus. We're outgunned, taking heavy losses. Admiral Novak's calling for reinforcements, but—" A thunderous boom, the officer paled. "They just took out the Thor. We can't hold them." John's blood ran cold. The fleet was being slaughtered. He spun to face the Omegas, eyes blazing. "Gear up now. This is your baptism by fire. We're heading for Zephyrus." The soldiers armed up in a flurry of activity. Powered armor, plasma rifles, grav chutes, an arsenal of death. They boarded the sleek stealth ship, cloaking field shimmering as it knifed through space. John's hands flew over the controls, plotting a course for Zephyrus Prime. Volkov pulled up a holomap, walking the Omegas through the plan. Primary target is the planetary defense grid. We knock that out, open up a hole for the invasion force, expect heavy resistance. The map zoomed in, highlighting a massive fortified complex bristling with gun emplacements. That's the command center. We hit them hard. Hit them fast. No mercy. John's grip tightened on the controls, Michael's face flashing through his mind. He welcomed the rage, let it engulf him. The Wagner would burn. Every last one. The stealth ship streaked towards Zephyrus, a dark arrow in the void, carrying the Confederation's last hope and its most terrible weapon. The Omega stealth ship sliced through the darkness of space, its cloaking field rendering it invisible to Wagner sensors. Inside the sleek vessel, the soldiers checked their weapons, the whir of powered armor and click of magazines echoing in the hold. John stood at the front, his face a mask of cold determination. The ship shuddered as it entered atmosphere, streaking towards the surface of Zephyrus Prime. It settled on the outskirts of the Wagner military installation, hidden by its cloak. The Omegas disembarked, moving with preternatural grace and speed, their footsteps silent on the alien soil. They split into two teams with practiced efficiency. Volkov led his soldiers towards the command center, their objective to disable the planetary defense grid. Sato and his team peeled off, heading to infiltrate the Wagner's network and mine for critical intel. Volkov's team encountered the first guards, Wagner soldiers in chitinous armor, plasma rifles at the ready. The Omegas moved like ghosts, flowing from shadow to shadow. Volkov was on the first guard in a flash, his enhanced strength making short work of the Wagner's neck. The others fell in a flurry of silenced gunshots and snapped spines, never even having a chance to raise the alarm. The Omegas continued deeper into the facility, dropping Wagners with ruthless efficiency. But as they neared the control room, a new threat emerged. A hulking figure stepped from the shadows, towering over even the Omegas. Krathgar, the Wagner's own bioengineered warriors. The Krathgar raised a massive plasma cannon, energy humming as it charged. Volkov dove to the side as a searing blast scorched the wall behind him. He came up firing, the bark of his rifle deafening in the enclosed space. But the Krathgar's armor held, the rounds sparking off its surface. It lunged at Volkov with blinding speed, razor claws extended. Volkov met the charge head-on, bionic arm whirring as he deflected the slashing talons. The two super soldiers grappled, a blur of bionics and scales, neither giving an inch. Volkov drove a knee into the Krathgar's abdomen, feeling ribs crack. But the Wagner warrior barely seemed to notice, its jaws snapping inches from Volkov's face. Volkov hammered his metal fist into the Krathgar's jaw, hearing bone shatter. The Wagner reeled back, spitting blood and teeth. Volkov pressed the advantage, raining down blows, the fury of a century of war in every strike. The Krathgar fell, its skull a ruined mess. Volkov stood over it, breathing hard, blood dripping from his knuckles. His team had dispatched the other Wagners, the control room now eerily silent. "Get that defense grid down now," Volkov growled, his voice rough with pain. He could feel the damage the Krathgar had done, broken ribs grinding with every breath. Across the facility, Sato and his team fought their way into the Wagner's server room. Sato jacked into the system, his cybernetic implants interfacing with the alien network. Reams of data flowed across his vision as he sliced through firewalls and decryption algorithms. Then he saw it. Plans for a weapon of unimaginable power, an energy cannon fueled by stolen Terran technology, a weapon that could incinerate planets, snuff out billions of lives in an instant. "Commander, we have a serious problem," Sato calmed, his normally calm voice edged with urgency. He relayed the intel on the doomsday weapon, watching John's face harden. In the command center, Volkov's team finally cracked the defense grid. The Wagner's orbital cannons went dark, their comm channels filling with panicked chatter. In orbit, the Terran fleet surged forward, the path now clear. But John barely noticed. his mind reeling with the revelation of the Vognir's planet killer. They had to stop it, had to destroy it before it could be turned on the Confederation. "New mission," John barked over the comm. "We're taking out that weapon. Prep for assault on the capital. We end this now." Ignoring the pain from his wounds, Volkov gathered his soldiers. There could be no rest, not yet. Not until the Vognir threat was eliminated, root and stem. Not until his son was avenged. The Omega soldiers mustered to John's side, the fate of the Confederation resting on their shoulders as they prepared to strike at the heart of the Vognir Empire. In high orbit above Zephyrus Prime, the void of space erupted in blinding flashes and silent explosions as the Terran fleet clashed with the Vognir armada. Massive warships traded devastating volleys, the darkness lit by lances of plasma and the flare of failing shields. Amidst this maelstrom, a small Terran shuttle cut through the chaos, its hull pitted and scarred from the gauntlet it had run. Inside, John gripped the controls with white knuckles, his eyes hard as he wove between the warring behemoths. Behind him, the Omega soldiers checked their weapons, their faces grim beneath the Krathgar helmets they wore. The shuttle shuddered as it hit atmosphere, the sky outside the viewports turning from black to burning orange. John guided the craft down into the war-torn cityscape of the Vognir capital, skimming ruined towers and cratered streets. They set down in the shadow of a collapsed skyscraper, the shuttle's ramp hissing open. John and the Omegas emerged, their Krathgar armor glinting in the ruddy light. They moved swiftly and silently, the advanced suit systems masking their life signs. Vognir patrols stalked the rubble-strewn avenues, but the disguised Terrans slipped past them like ghosts. They made their way deeper into the city, following the coordinates Sato had extracted to the hidden entrance of the Doomsday weapon facility. The entrance was guarded by a squad of Krathgar elites, their armor a deep crimson. John and the Omegas approached openly, trusting in their disguises. "Halt!" the lead Krathgar barked. "Identify yourselves." Volkov stepped forward, his suit's vocalizer distorting his voice into a rasping snarl. "Reinforcements from the Eastern Front. We have orders to bolster the weapons defenses." The Krathgar hesitated, then stepped aside. "Proceed." The Terrans filed past and into the facility, a labyrinthine complex of reinforced tunnels and cavernous chambers. Automated defenses swiveled to track them as they delved deeper, but their IFF signals read as friendly. Then an alarm blared, the lights shifting to angry red. Their disguise had been penetrated. Vognir soldiers poured into the corridors, plasma rifles spitting deadly bolts. The Omegas reacted with blinding speed, their own weapons answering in a storm of steel and fire. John fought alongside them, his rifle bucking in his hands, his face a mask of cold fury. They fought their way down, leaving a trail of shattered scales and broken bodies, until they reached the heart of the facility. And there, standing before the pulsing core of the Doomsday weapon, was Orion. The Vognir commander turned to face them, his eyes widening as John removed his helmet. "You," Orion hissed, "I killed your whelp, and now I'll kill you." John felt the rage rise in him, a red tide that drowned all reason. He charged at Orion, a wordless roar tearing from his throat. They clashed in a blur of strikes and counters, John's fury giving him strength. But Orion was fast, his reptilian reflexes allowing him to evade John's blows. His claws raked across John's armor, leaving gleaming trails. Orion's tail lashed out, slamming John to the ground. The Vognir loomed over him, a vicious grin splitting his face. "Weak, like your son. He begged before he died." John surged up, knocking Orion back. They grappled, straining against each other, until John managed to pin the Vognir. He drew his knife, the blade hovering over Orion's throat. But he hesitated. To strike now in cold blood. Was he no better than the Vognir? Orion sensed his hesitation. He twisted, breaking John's grip, his claws slashing for John's face. A plasma bolt took Orion in the side of the head, burning through scales and bone. The Vognir fell, a smoking ruin where his skull had been. John looked up to see Volkov lowering his rifle, the barrel still glowing. "It's done," the Russian said. "Now we finish this." The Omegas had set the charges, the weapon's core thrumming with building energy. They ran, the timer counting down, fighting through the Wagniers who tried to stop them. They burst from the facility, the explosion chasing at their heels. The ground bucked and heaved as they sprinted, buildings toppling around them. And then they were clear, stumbling into the open air as behind them, the facility collapsed in on itself, the doomsday weapon reduced to molten slag. John stood amidst the smoking ruins of the Wagner capital, his armor blackened and dented, his body aching with a dozen wounds, but he felt a grim satisfaction. It was over. Michael was avenged. Above them, the Terran fleet pressed their advantage, the Wagner ships falling back in disarray. Drop pods rained down, disgorging Terran soldiers onto the broken streets. The war was not yet won, but this battle at least was theirs. Triumphant cheers erupted across the Terran worlds as news of the Omega soldiers' victory spread like wildfire. In every city, crowds poured into the streets, waving Terran flags and chanting the names of their saviors. John and his team were rushed back to Earth, where they were greeted by a sea of adoring faces and a blinding storm of camera flashes. Admiral Novak clapped John on the shoulder, his usually stern face split by a grin. "You did it, Campbell, you crazy bastard, you actually did it." But even as the celebrations raged, the work of securing the Wagner's surrender was already underway. Terran troops poured onto Zephyrus Prime, rounding up the remaining pockets of resistance and beginning the long process of rooting out the Wagner's entrenched power structures. It was during this chaotic period that Zoran first approached John. The Wagner was lean and wiry, with deep scars crisscrossing his scales, marks of a hard life spent fighting in the shadows. "Commander Campbell," Zoran rasped, his voice a low hiss, "we need to talk in private." John followed Zoran into a secluded room, his hand never far from his sidearm. The Wagner activated a holoprojector, the blue light casting eerie shadows across his face. "The weapon you destroyed was only the beginning," Zoran said, images of strange devices and complex schematics floating in the air. "The Wagner's true prize was this, a mind-control technology that would make slaves of us all." John felt a chill run down his spine as he studied the projections. Neural implants, subliminal conditioning, chemical manipulation, a horror show of psychological warfare. "We have to stop this," John growled. "Where is this research being done?" "Zephyrus Secundus," Zoran replied. "A hidden facility guarded by mercenaries. My people can get you inside, but we must act quickly. If this technology falls into the wrong hands—" John nodded grimly. He knew all too well the kind of damage such a weapon could inflict. The very thought turned his stomach. Convincing Admiral Novak proved difficult. The man was skeptical of trusting a Wagner, resistance fighter or not. But John persisted, laying out the potential consequences of allowing such technology to proliferate. In the end, Novak relented, giving John the go-ahead for a covert operation. John handpicked his team, Volkov, Sato, and a handful of other Omega soldiers, the best of the best. They met with Zoran and his shadow-scale agents, poring over intel and mapping out their approach. The journey to Zephyrus Secundus was tense, the cramped confines of their stealth shuttle filled with a palpable sense of unease. As they neared the moon's surface, the reason for their discomfort became clear. A veritable army of mercenaries surrounded the research facility, armed to the teeth with advanced weapons. Whoever was funding this project clearly had deep pockets. John checked his rifle, the weight familiar and comforting in his hands. Beside him, Volkov cracked his knuckles, the servos in his bionic arm whirring softly. Sato's fingers danced across his console, his eyes flickering with lines of code. They knew the odds they faced, knew the risks they were taking, but they also knew the stakes. The fate of entire worlds hung in the balance. As the shuttle touched down in a hidden ravine, John met the eyes of each of his soldiers. In them he saw the same determination that burned in his own heart. "It's all right, people," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Let's do this for Terra, for the Confederation, for every free soul in the galaxy." The Omega soldiers nodded, their faces set with grim purpose. They checked their weapons one final time, then moved to the shuttle's hatch. The door hissed open, and they stepped out into the harsh light of Zephyrus Secundus, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them in the depths of the Vognier's twisted research facility. The shuttle touched down, kicking up a cloud of grey dust. John and his strike team disembarked, weapons ready. Captain Volkov gave a sharp nod before leading his squad towards the facility's main gate. Zoran motioned to a narrow crevice in the moon's rocky surface. "This way. The tunnels will take us into the heart of the complex." John and Sato followed the shadow scale into the dark passage, activating their armor's night vision. They moved swiftly and silently, the only sound the soft crunch of boots on stone. Minutes later they emerged into a cavernous chamber, filled with winding catwalks and blinking consoles. John scanned the room, his eyes widening. In the chamber's center stood a towering machine, a nightmarish tangle of tubes and wires, and suspended within, rows of human and Wagner captives, their scalps bristling with neural implants. "My God," John breathed, "they're not just controlling minds, they're networking them." Sato jacked into a terminal, his fingers flying across the interface. "The system is linked to facilities across the sector, thousands of implants, all slave to a central hub." A cold laugh echoed through the chamber. John spun, rifle raised, to see a figure emerge from the shadows. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" Dr. Zithax smiled, his teeth gleaming in the half-light. "The culmination of decades of research. With this, we will bring the galaxy to heel." John snarled. "You're insane. We stopped you before. We'll stop you again." Zithax chuckled. "You only delayed the inevitable. Even now, my thralls move to seize control of your precious confederation. When the dust settles, I will rule." John fired, but Zithax was already moving, his form blurring with inhuman speed. The Wagner slammed into John, sending him crashing to the deck. They fought in a whirlwind of blows, John's armor sparking under the assault. Zithax was fast, monstrously strong. John could barely keep up. "Oh, you're too late," Zithax hissed, his claws raking John's chestplate. "In minutes my override signal will activate. Your admiral, your leaders, will all be mine. I've already won." John risked a glance at Sato. The lieutenant was typing furiously, his face beaded with sweat. "Just a little longer." Zithax followed his gaze, his eyes widening. "No!" He hurled John aside, lunging for Sato. John tackled him in midair, the two of them slamming into a bank of machinery. Sparks flew, alarms blared. Sato looked up from the console, his face pale. "John, he's triggered a self-destruct. The whole place is going to blow." John hauled himself to his feet, blood running down his face. "Get out of here, Sato. Grab Zoran and go. I'll hold him." Sato hesitated, but... "Go!" John roared. Sato nodded, racing for the exit. John turned back to Zithax, the Wagner scientist struggling to rise. "Looks like neither of us is walking away from this," John growled. Zithax bared his teeth. "So be it, human. We'll settle this in hell." They charged each other as the countdown ticked away, the fate of worlds hanging in the balance. John fought with the fury of a man with nothing left to lose, his mind filled with thoughts of Michael, of the son he had failed to save. He would not fail again. Whatever the cost, he would stop Zithax, he would protect his people, even if it meant laying down his life. John coughed, his lungs searing as he sucked in a breath of the alien atmosphere. His armor cracked and scorched, sparked and fizzed. He rolled onto his side, groaning as pain lanced through his battered body. The last thing he remembered was the countdown hitting 0, the flash of the detonation, and then a blinding light enveloping him as he lunged for Dr. Zithax's teleporter. He pushed himself up, his eyes widening as he took in his surroundings. Towering spires of iridescent crystal pierced a sky of swirling lavender and gold. Bioluminescent flora carpeted the ground, pulsing with an eerie inner light. This was not Zephyrus Secundus. This was not anywhere in known space. John staggered to his feet, his suit's life support systems struggling to adapt to the strange environment. He had to find shelter, had to... "Welcome, John Campbell." A voice, ancient and resonant, echoed in his mind. "We have been expecting you." John spun, his hand reaching for a weapon that was no longer there. A figure emerged from the crystalline forest, tall and slender, its form shrouded in shimmering robes. "Who are you?" John demanded, his voice raspy. "Where am I?" The figure inclined its head. "I am Zalnara of the Kalnori, and you, John Campbell, are on Sinthari, our homeworld." John's mind reeled. The Kalnori. A name whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a species of legend. Zalnara stepped closer, its eyes glowing with an inner fire. "We have watched your struggle against the Vognir with great interest. Their mind-control technology, it is not of their making. It is a perversion of our own abilities, stolen from us long ago." John's eyes narrowed. "What do you want from me?" "Your help," Zalnara said simply. "Recover what was stolen, stop the Vognir, do this, and we will return you to your own universe." John hesitated, torn. The Kalnori were offering a way home, but at what cost? "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice hard. Zalnara's form shimmered, a pulse of light that John felt in his bones. "Because, John Campbell, the fate of both our universes hangs in the balance. The Vognir's actions threaten us all." John closed his eyes, images of Michael of the Omega soldiers of terror flashing through his mind. He had a duty, a responsibility. "All right," he said, opening his eyes. "I'll do it. I'll stop the Vognir, but then you send me home." Zalnara inclined its head. "Agreed. But first, you must learn. You must understand the true nature of the power the Vognir seek to control." John felt a tingling at the base of his skull, a pressure building behind his eyes, latent telepathic abilities awakening after generations of dormancy. "Your training begins now," Zalnara said, its voice a whisper in John's mind. "Prepare yourself, John Campbell. The path ahead will not be easy." John set his jaw, a flicker of his old determination sparking in his chest. He had faced impossible odds before. He would face them again. For Terra, for the Omega soldiers, for Michael. John's heart raced as he crept through the crystalline halls of the Kalnori citadel. The mind control device clutched tightly against his chest. Every footfall echoed like a thunderclap in his ears, every shadow a potential enemy. He had to get the device back to his own universe, had to destroy it before the Kalnori could use it to enslave countless worlds. But first, he needed to escape. John reached out with his mind, his newly honed telepathic senses probing for any sign of pursuit. There, at the edge of his awareness, the cold alien thoughts of Kalnori guards. They were searching for him. No time to lose. John focused, channeling his psychic energy into the device. A portal shimmered into existence before him, a swirling vortex of light and shadow. With a final glance over his shoulder, John leaped through the portal snapping shut behind him. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Slowly he pushed himself to his feet, taking in his surroundings. The ruins of a once great city stretched out before him, shattered skyscrapers and burnt-out vehicles littering the streets. The air hung thick with smoke and the acrid tang of ozone. And there, striding through the rubble, a familiar figure, tall and broad, his bionic arm gleaming in the half-light. "Volkov!" John called out, his voice raw. The Russian turned, his eyes widening. "John, is that really you?" John nodded, stumbling forward to clasp Volkov's hand. "It's me, I made it back." Volkov shook his head in disbelief. "We thought you were dead. When the Kalnori came—" "The Kalnori are here." John's blood ran cold. "They came through a week ago," another voice said. Lieutenant Sato emerged from the shadows, his face gaunt and streaked with grime. "Hit us out of nowhere. The Confederation, the Vognir, we've been fighting together, but it's not enough." John held up the mind control device. This is what they're after. With this, they could enslave every mind in the universe. Volkov's jaw tightened. Then we destroy it, and we take the fight to them. Sato nodded grimly. Their mothership is in orbit, coordinating the invasion. If we could get aboard... John met their eyes, saw the same fire that burned in his own heart. Then that's what we'll do. We'll end this once and for all. The plan was desperate, bordering on suicidal, but they had no choice. The fate of the universe hung in the balance. They gathered what remained of their forces, a ragtag mix of Terran and Wagner soldiers, united by their shared determination. Under the cover of night, they launched their assault. Cloaked shuttles streaked towards the Kalnori mothership, dodging streams of anti-aircraft fire. They struck like lightning, breaching the hull and spilling out onto the decks in a fury of blades and blasters. John fought at the head of the charge, Volkov and Sato at his sides. They carved a path of destruction through the ship, alarms blaring, Kalnori warriors falling before their onslaught. But for every enemy they cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place. The Kalnori were relentless, driven by a single overriding imperative, the eradication of all other life. The battle raged through the corridors, a brutal, bloody affair. John saw friends fall, saw Volkov take a searing blast to the chest, his bionic arm torn away. Still, they pushed on, driven by desperation and sheer, stubborn will. At last they reached the heart of the ship, the chamber housing the Overmind itself. The Kalnori leader loomed before them, a towering figure pulsing with psychic might. "Foolish primates," the Overmind boomed, its voice echoing in their minds. "You cannot hope to stand against us. We are the future. You are extinction waiting to happen." John stepped forward, the mind control device held high. "You're wrong. As long as even one of us still draws breath, we will fight. We will never stop fighting." The Overmind laughed, a sound like the shattering of glass. "Then you will die, along with all the rest." The Kalnori leader lashed out with a blast of psychic energy, a force that could shatter minds like kindling. But John was ready. He reached out with his own power, merging his consciousness with the mind control device. He felt it amplify his thoughts, focusing them into a lance of pure, searing will. The Overmind's attack met John's, the 2 psychic forces clashing like titans. The very air seemed to scream, reality buckling around them. John pushed harder, pouring everything he had into the device. His mind burned with the effort, synapses sizzling, thoughts flaying away. But slowly, inexorably, he felt the Overmind's defenses crumble. With a final desperate surge, John shattered the Kalnori's mind, the psychic feedback rushing out in a blinding wave. Across the ship, across the planet below, the Kalnori writhed and fell, their minds bursting like overripe fruit. In an instant, an entire species winked out of existence, leaving only silence in their wake. John fell to his knees, smoke curling from his eyes, his nose, his mouth. He could feel his mind unraveling, his very self disintegrating. Sato was there, cradling John's head in his lap. Tears cut tracks through the grime on the lieutenant's face. "You did it," Sato whispered. "You saved us all." John tried to smile, but his face wouldn't obey. The world was fading, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. With the last of his strength, he reached out, touching Sato's mind with his own. A final thought, a final image, Michael, smiling in the sunlight, forever young, forever at peace. Then John Campbell, hero of the Terran Confederation, the man who had given everything to save the universe, breathed his last. But even as his body failed, his spirit soared free, rising to join his son in the endless light of eternity. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.